Again, my name is Pires. I will say I have the pleasure to work with Dave for many, many years. And, Dave... I think, yeah, you can hear me okay now? Okay, I just needed to bring it a little closer. So I've worked with Dave for years, and, his sincerity, his commitment to the community is really unparalleled. It truly is. So it's a pleasure in working with Amy as well in the office, and Tara also here, who deals with victim services. I can say very dedicated people I'm proud to work with. A little bit about myself. I've been in the government for 36 years. I took the oath of office when Ronald Reagan was president and Caspar Weinberger was the Secretary of Defense. So that gives you some idea that I've been around for a while. But I can say on that date, the pride of being able to raise my right hand and frankly to take the oath to defend the Constitution. And I know our folks here are 100% dedicated to that. I'm a civil servant. I serve. I'm a civil servant. So I hope everyone understands that. We serve everyone in the community. We uphold the Constitution of the United States. That's why I'm here, and that's what I'm committed to. So I just want to talk about where we're at now, because we have undoubtedly more instances of targeted violence. I mean, you only have to, the names now, it used to be, Dave kids me, but I could be like a textbook in the past, where I could point to every perpetrator, every instance. There are so many of them now that I'm saying either my gray matter, my neurons aren't firing like they used to, or there's a heck of a lot more happening now. And, that's disturbing. And democracy, I do think, is being challenged. We've had an inflection point. I mean, we had a couple of years of folks not interacting socially, socially isolated, on the internet, online, going into these forums, frankly, going down the rabbit holes, because we're human. People want community. They want a sense of belonging to something, to be a part of the community, be a part of the fabric of America. And a couple of years of being denied that has put people in a difficult position. And my take on that is that I look for a couple of things, and a couple of weeks ago we were at Rhode Island College. It was called a call to action, and some folks, see something, say something. That's great, right? But see what, when, who do I report to? We'll talk about that a little bit, but I would say there's two things that I'd really like the crowd to think about, and these are things that, in my experience, have been that when you have these watch points, that when you have an individual that is alienated, socially isolated, and they also feel humiliated, they feel that somehow their voice isn't being heard. That's a formula that needs to be addressed. Because if that's left alone to percolate, to simmer, at some point that's going to manifest itself in an unhealthy way. So we need to get back to open, respectful dialogue. I will give a shout out. There's a group in Rhode Island called Courageous Rhode Island, that is getting people back into the skills of active listening. Getting people back to hey, I can listen to everyone, and I can accept what they have to say. That doesn't mean I have to believe it. I don't have to inculcate that. I don't have to personalize that. But I can listen to them, and I can try to find out where they're at. Because if you don't do that, and you stunt that, you blunt that, unmitigated, that's going to be a problem. So, again, if you have isolation and alienation, you couple that with a sense of humiliation, you've been bullied, you've been somehow abused verbally, perhaps physically. That's the formula that you're going to see interact, that you're going to see someone engage in school violence, engage in targeted violence in a community.
I'm just listening to what you're saying, and
Yep.
I'm appreciating it. But
when I spoke to Attorney Romero, if I can just sort of paraphrase what you said, I made it clear that Christian children are targeted okay, and being singled out. And Attorney Ramiro's response was to call the Department of Ed or go to the U.S. Department of Education. And I explained, all due respect, that that's exactly what we've been doing, is sort of, asking why it's this sort of attack against Christians and white males is allowed or just sort of glossed over. And really, Attorney Ramiro's response was an indication of how it's ignored, because there really is no recourse for children who are Christian or being singled out by these sorts of curriculum items, okay? So when I hear you talking about, identifying hate speech or hateful conduct that can result in a crime or harming a child or somebody or anybody, what about white children, white male children, and children that are Christian? Are they not protected?
So my take on that is that we need to listen to everyone. And if you have a child in a school system that again feels alienated, maybe even feels humiliated because of whatever their identity is, be that Christian, be it gay, whatever it might be, if that individual is being alienated and humiliated, then that left unaddressed is going to become problematic. So, but again, does that necessarily trigger the law? Not always. I mean, maybe that's an uncomfortable answer, but not always.
If white were replaced with black, the FBI would rightly so descend on the school. If black children were singled out, rightly so the FBI would descend on the school. Excuse me.
Okay.
If you take white Christians out, then we
Yes, we can.
Excuse me. This is not the opportunity for your discussion right now. I understand you're really concerned. This is not the appropriate place right now.
I think it is the appropriate
No,
place.
I think we need to talk about
I'm
it
actually
afterwards.
very concerned for the safety
Would you like to
of
talk with me
children.
outside? Would you like to go out and talk with me outside of the
No,
room?
I don't.
I would
Excuse
like
me.
to-
We have a presentation that we're going to
Exactly,
do. It's
exactly.
about hate crimes and hate incidents, where and how to report them. We have heard you, and this is the end of it right here. You have been told who to speak to. We can address that.
I've been told to speak to nobody.
You can follow up, but this is not the place to hear your further complaint. Okay, so please allow us to finish this presentation, and again, we can talk afterwards.
Thank you. So, in all sincerity, I mean, speaking for myself, we will move on. I think we all, I'm certainly can, can accept differing opinions, and I hope we all can. But the reality is, not everything, and this is what I'm here to speak about, not everything necessarily rises to the level of a hate crime, or what specifically the domain I'm in is terrorism. So just to define that, when we talk about hate crime, I think, after Amy, I think, did a nice job explaining that, not everything rises to that level. And same with domestic terrorism, and I know we hear this all the time, right? An instance might seem hateful, it might seem terroristic, and they say, well, why aren't they going after this as terrorism, the same as they did international terrorism? Well, I can say why a lot of times is there has to be two things, okay? It has to be an ideologically based to be terrorism. In other words, it has to be for political or social, you're trying to affect political or social change as your objective. So we can look at drug terror, right? We can look at like an international group, like say an international gang like MS-13 that you've probably heard of. Now, some would say, should we prosecute, gang members as terrorists? Well, you can have that thought. The reality is there are certain things within the statute that says what will trigger that. To be quote-unquote terrorism, is it ideologically based? Is the perpetrator of that act trying to bring about political or social change by that act? And that's one of the key things we look at. So I just want you to keep that in the back of your mind. So we've seen targeted violence. So there's targeted violence, there's terrorism, and there's hate crime. We look at those all differently. We look at them based on the criteria at hand. And one of the things that we're finding is that I think we all know, I think we all know in our gut, and I think we see it within our children, is that this mix of social media, it can be, you know, it can be wonderful for certain things, but it can become a very caustic mix. It can allow folks to have a degree of anonymity where, you know, things are put out there that they wouldn't say face to face, and it can have a longevity to it that we would never have happened years ago. So this now stays with someone, and this is repeated, right? And also for someone who's done international terrorism for a long time, make no mistake about this. We have adversaries, near-peer adversaries, that we've seen, and this is undeniable, this is fact, that we can point to, like the Internet Research Agency, okay, that Prigozhin, who is now fighting the Wagner Group, the Wagner Group that you've probably heard of, that is a private military company, basically having an organization to sow discourse and discontent, to try to divide us and to try to divide our democracy. So there are elements out there at play that are being perpetrated on us, and we need to be savvy consumers of information. We need to get multiple sources of information. And what for years I taught a class called Homeland Security and the Intelligence Community. And one of the things I said from day one to my students, go to a media outlet that you disagree with. Start there. And then get 3 other sources. So if it's, if you're a CNN person, see what's on BBC, Fox, Al Jazeera. Go out there and see what the other side is saying about this. Because we can't live in sound bites, okay? We have to explore and come to some kind of nuanced understanding of what's going on here. We are being manipulated. And we're being manipulated in some cases by our near-peer adversaries who want that to happen. And I see it happening. And I don't, for being 36 years into this, I'm a defender of democracy, period. That's it. And democracy lives with free, open dialogue and acceptance of everyone. With life, liberty, pursuit of happiness. That's what this is about. And this is united against hate. It should be united for peace. Right? So, I only have 15 minutes here tonight, but I want you to understand real quick what happens when you report information. We don't go and look at everyone. There's an intelligence assessment, a threat assessment. Again, is it credible? Does the individual have the capability to act? If we don't have that ingredient, then that is not likely to go anywhere. If those conditions do arise, and then and only then, we see some other factors involved. The type of postings. We might see threatening postings online, perhaps. Some of these, again, we all live in the world, so we've got 3 things going on here, really. We've got the political system, right, globally and locally, and nationally. The political system, which is polarized. We all know that right now. Then we've got a revolution in technology going on right now. I mean, chat GPT, AI, deep fakes. And we all know the ability to do that. It's quite easy now to act as if you're another individual, right? Through deep fakes, through video, through audio, etc. It's going to get increasingly easier. And I'm definitely not against technology. I'm a huge proponent of it. But we have to be very careful because, in the open, when you throw something in the Google box, it's a lot different than if you are looking for Chat GPT to give you an answer. Because if I flood that with misinformation, I'm getting misinformation back. And that is exactly what the Internet Research Agency, what Prigozhin did, is to flood, using botnets, basically hijacking your open domains, right, individuals who aren't protecting their networks, and to be able to flood that information out. So if I can flood enough wrong information out there, what does that become? Just information. No one's saying it's misinformation anymore. They're just saying it's information because, hey, look at how many, look at, this is what's hitting. This now raises up the level of what is, this is what I'm going to get back, right, from my search. So, again, if I create a lot of white noise, that doesn't mean I'm creating truth. It just means I've created a lot of information. What intelligence analysts do is and this is what everyone has to start thinking about, is we have to be discriminating consumers of information now. We need to really think about that, and we need to have the conversations with our kids about being discriminating consumers of information. I'm not here to talk about any particular platform, but if you're living on TikTok and that is your only source of information, or you're living on any platform, you're potentially in the danger zone because you're not subjecting yourself to anything else. And what happens is in these forums, and we see it time and time again, Dave's seen it in his career in law enforcement, that if I am an individual that's alienated, humiliated, disconnected, perhaps even depressed, and I'm searching, I'm seeking, I need and want a community, and I'm frustrated. And I finally find that community that says, you know what, you're right. And it's the first time I ever heard that. It's the first time I ever heard that. But what do I want to do? I want that community to accept me now. So I'm not only going to be just a joiner, I'm going to show that I'm actually a fully involved, committed person to that, right? Because this is my new group. And when we have high times of anxiety, be it a pandemic, be it technical change that's unprecedented, we're in an atmosphere of anxiety, and when that happens is we seek simple truths. Because it's also confusing. So if I sit here and I try to give you a nuanced conversation about terrorism or counterterrorism, there's some people who are just going to get plain pissed off at me because I can't give them the plain truth that we're going to prosecute everything 100% the same. But what I can say is that we're going to take a careful look, right? But, people want sound bites nowadays where, you go on any media outlet, you have the far left, the far right, they argue, and that's it, and then everyone's left confused. As opposed to, maybe I have a nuanced conversation here, that's not going to sell anymore. I try to talk to younger people, they get pissed at me. Would you just get to the point? Okay, I get it. Would you just shut up now? What's your point? The point is I'm trying to get to that, and it's tough. And so I think our children, and this is my biggest concern at this inflection point, at this stage in my career, is that kids aren't, I teach a class over at Salve. They're better writers, they're wonderful kids than, every year I'm more impressed by their writing skills, their honesty. But I will say, they don't like the longer answers. They don't like the discussion as much as they did in years past. They get more triggered, as the term is used quite frequently, they get more triggered by the debate. And I think we need to find a way to get past getting triggered by the debate, and we need to realize that we've got a lot of people who whether you, for whatever reason, over the last few years, particularly our young people, have suffered. A high school kid who didn't get to go to graduation, who did a drive-by, like they go into a McDonald's window. I mean, think about that. Back when, when I was a kid, that was a big deal, right? Your final thing senior year, these kids got denied that. And they're looking, and they're a little bit distracted. They're a little bit disjointed. And we as adults owe them an open ear and to understand that, let's not let them go and take that anger and put it in the wrong direction. And that's what's happening sometimes. And with these online forums, what will happen, and I think we all know this, but you'll then get invited to an encryption forum, an encrypted forum. So you might start off on a regular overt platform, but then you might get invited to the encrypted platform, where the discourse becomes a lot different. And that's why early intervention is important. It has to be multifunctional. It does take a team of teams. So, I look here, frankly, a lot of folks, I don't see a lot of young kids, a mix, but hopefully, a forum like this we need more young people to talk about this and to be honest with them. And so we all kind of have to get out there and say, look, we know and we realize that there's a lot of anger out there, but I will say for my part is hate and terrorism simmer under those two conditions. So if you see someone socially isolated, humiliated, they feel they're not part of this process, they're not part of our democracy, you need to invite them in and you need to do that, whatever it takes, whatever that conversation takes. You need to work for that and you need to address it. And we can't do it, it has to be multifunctional, right? I mean, we all know what works in schools. It works by having everyone from that custodian that everyone loves, to the bus driver, to the school counselor, to the teacher, to the social worker, to the principal and the superintendent in that administration say, I'm committed personally. And signal that commitment to every teacher and everyone in that school, because that kid someday when he's feeling really angry and he's been all night long on some platform and he's animated, it might only be, maybe it's that custodian that they trust. And that's why, or maybe it's that bus driver that's the only one who's ever said good morning with a smile to that kid, for whatever reason. So I just ask that we all be a part of this. It's united against hate. This is not the federal government saying we have the answer. This has got to be the community, 100%. And very few of these probably are going to be prosecuted. That's the truth. I mean, they're not going to raise to the level of federal prosecution often. But we can intervene early, and we can keep that next explosive event, hopefully, from happening. Secret Service has a good formula. They've looked at it for years. They know what happens in schools, and they know what it takes. It takes a team of teams, and it takes an unrelenting team of teams. Talk to that kid until you can't stand it anymore. But it's what it takes, so I'll leave it there. Thank you for your time, and if you have any questions for me out there,
I got a question.
I think this one will work.
Yep. So I guess my question, one rhetorical, one very quick real question. The rhetorical question, of course, is how much of the government's frustration and big media, established platform frustration, is the fact that they no longer have a monopoly on misinformation. And of course, I looked at someone like Julian Assange as a hero. All right, I look to that guy who's over in Russia right now, hiding out because he dropped the veil on Americans being spied on as a hero. All right, so that's my question. All of a sudden everyone's upset because somebody else is telling the facts. My actual question is, let's talk about the government's relationship with social media companies and, for example, Twitter and Facebook and their willingness to collaborate with these platforms to spy on Americans' conversation, legal and otherwise, where there was no physical threat. At what point in time have we as a country decided that oppositional thought is now future crime? Because that's what you're doing here. You're taking the behaviors of different groups, left and right, mostly right, and describing that to future crime.
Yep. So quickly, I mean, my personal answer to that is that I would like to have our legislators understand, first of all, social media, what's going on, better than they do at the current time. I mean, some do, but, I don't want, and nothing against any of these individuals, but, I don't think a Mark Zuckerberg or Jeff Bezos or an Elon Musk or anyone who has the keys to any kingdom, to any platform, being the ones who are the arbitrator, sole arbitrator of information. I think there has to be legislators have to understand what's going on these platforms, and then they have to think about what is a reasonable approach to kind of look at the content on there. I mean, if that content, we all know now from being in this discussion, right? If there's overt threats that are taking place on any of those platforms that you know, they're calling out specific groups, they're saying that they should be annihilated, they don't belong, etc. Well, then, you know, I mean, my personal take is there should be some content moderation, but that content moderation has to be carefully thought out, and it should be thought out by the legislators who are taking a very careful look at this. I don't think it should be arbitrary that it's in the hands of any one individual just by virtue because they own a platform, because as you said, the media used to be, when I was a kid, there was 3 media platforms, right? There was NBC, ABC, and CBS. That was it. And then you could go to the VHF, you know, the VHF channels, and you could get the Worldwide Wrestling Federation or something, right? But I mean, at the end of the day, that was it. But now there's so much out there, so we have to have people understand like how information even flows. And I do say if that's being, if there are things, content going on there, like at the instance I use, if that's being pushed out by like a Prigozhin very intentionally to get on certain platforms just because they can flood that platform. Well, my personal take, only mine, is that, you know, content moderation there, it makes sense for someone to take a look at this and to say what's truth and what's fiction, but no one should be the sole arbitrator. That has to be done through the legislative process, I think. That's my own opinion, and I'm just speaking for me.
And my very quick response is,
Well, no, we've got
it's none of your business what we do. It's none of your business, and there are a lot of people who wouldn't distinguish between the Raytheon-run Department of Defense and the guy over in the Soviet Union who's making some bucks on it. They're both making money off of American and Eastern European lives. So the notion that you have any say as government in my private conversations is balderdash.
Do we have any other questions before we move on to the next to our panel?
Okay.
I know, it's scary. The whole free speech thing is scary.
So, as I say, I'm more than happy. I'll be somewhere in the back. If anyone would like to, you know, kind of talk to me personally, look, your opinions matter, but I don't want to manipulate the rest of the program. So, thank you.
So if we could please have our panelists come up. And the panelists that we have are South Kingstown Police Chief Morning, Narragansett Police Chief Sean Corrigan, North Kingstown Captain Jeff St. Ange, Danielle Yankee from the Kent County Prevention Coalition. We have Tammy Brown, who's the Artistic Director of the Contemporary Theater. And thank you guys so much for joining us. I will yell very loudly. So if we could, starting from left to right, if you could share the microphone. So Chief Corrigan, we'll start with you. Could you please just give us a brief intro on who you are, what you do, where you work?
Certainly. My name is Sean Corrigan. I am the Chief of Police in the town of Narragansett. I've been with Narragansett for 26 years and the last 7 years as the Chief of Police.
Thank you. Tammy?
My name is Tammy Brown. I'm the Artistic Director at the Contemporary Theater Company. It's a theater and a community group right over there in Wakefield.
Thank you. Danielle?
My name is Danielle Yankee. I work for the Kent County Prevention Coalition on a drug-free communities federal grant that works on preventing the use of tobacco and cannabis in LGBTQ youth.
Thank you.
Good evening, I'm Matthew Moynihan. I'm the Chief of Police at South Kingston. I'm coming up on my first year here. I started last June, at the end of June. I retired from the state police, and I'm a resident here in South Kingston. I'm happy to be here and part of this panel tonight.
Thank you. Captain?
Good evening. My name is Jeff St. Ange. I'm a captain with the North Kingstown Police Department, risen through the ranks from prosecution, officer, detective, prosecution, now in charge of detectives. I've been a member of the police department for 29 years, and I'm happy to be here and hopefully answer some questions.
Thank you. Rabbi Adler?
Rabbi Adler, I'm spiritual leader of Congregation Beth David in Narragansett, and also serve the needs of the Jewish community in Westerly. Very happy to be here.
Rabbi, we'll start with you. I know you mentioned something about flyers being distributed in your community. Are there other types of hate crimes and incidents that you're seeing? Maybe you could share what exactly your community is seeing?
So in our community, thankfully, we haven't really experienced much, but we do know that when we have a large gathering, we usually need a police presence, which is kind of disturbing. We also have been participating in security training. Several years ago, there was some anti-Semitic graffiti in one of the high schools, and we got a committee working together, and that resulted in a workshop for all the students on adversity and accepting differences and so on. As I said, we haven't had that much. One of the good things that's been going on is a lot of community work. We've had a strong interfaith relationship with Congregation Beth David. Call out to Father Craig Swan. And just a few weeks ago, we had an interfaith program at Congregation Beth David, visited by many local faith groups. So we're working on that piece of it, but we haven't, as far as I know, we haven't had any serious things going on yet.
Thank you. It sounds like you're doing a lot of good things to kind of improve relationships in your communities.
Absolutely.
So, Captain, can you tell us what North Kingstown Police are primarily seeing in North Kingstown as far as hate crimes or incidents?
I actually ran some stats earlier today, and we didn't have any. There was a question earlier about whether the police departments are required to or mandated to file information with the FBI. And my answer to that, and I'm not sure if the other chiefs will disagree, is no. Not directly in the way that you probably were thinking, but Dave Neal did answer that well. Through UCR reporting, we are mandated to report it that way. So the government gets access to our reports, and they pull that data up. So to answer the question, we haven't had any reports, or we haven't had any prosecution of those types of cases. We have had some, but as it was described earlier, the way we look at those cases is we take the information that's given to us, we decide if a crime has been committed, and then we decide if a specific group was targeted. And like police work, we work within a blueprint. We try to take those pieces of the puzzle, and fit it in. If it fits within the law, great. If the North Kingstown Police Department doesn't find that it fits within the law, we would forward it off to the Attorney General's office, and they've done a great job over the last few years for hate crimes. And then if they can't make the puzzle fit together to see if there's a crime that was committed and if it's a hate crime, then we would involve the government, the FBI. But as to answer your question, we haven't seen many. We've investigated a few reports, but there has not been any prosecution of any cases.
Thank you. Chief Moynihan, same question.
So in a review of our cases, we've had 2 within the last 5 years in looking at them. And both, again, it's first where the crime is committed, and then now we look at it whether it was motivated against a certain protected class. And so in the first case was a situation where an assault took place, and then there was text messages that were exchanged afterwards, and bringing in a sexual orientation. And so that information is reviewed. As the captain indicated, we work very closely with the Attorney General's office on all of these type of crimes to really look at the best avenue to prosecute it. So whether that would be within the state system, or whether it would raise to a level where we would partner with the U.S. Attorney's Office and have it potentially looked at there in charges. Second incident is actually still a pending case, but basically it was an incident where someone spit at someone else and then made racial slurs after the assault. And so again, you look at the totality of really of the elements of the crime and the assault that takes place, and then whether it was motivated based on that person's gender or race or religious beliefs.
Thank you. Danielle,
Can you repeat the question once more?
could you just share what you're seeing as far as hate incidents, hate crimes
Got it.
in the communities that you work with?
Absolutely. So I work often with LGBTQ youth. The acronym is lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, queer and questioning, and then there's usually some letters after that as well. What we see in both the statistics and anecdotally in the schools is LGBTQ youth are 2 to 3 times more likely to use substances. This is not anything to do inherently with them being LGBTQ. It's often because of the other stressors that they come in encounter with within, if that's in their community, within their schools. And we're looking at 2 to 3 times higher risk of using substances with that. Along with bullying, reports of harm that happens within the school, outside of school, these numbers are all elevated comparatively to heterosexual youth that are also reporting the same information. And what we see in the schools, just anecdotally, we do have certain groups that me and my colleague, who's not here tonight but would love to be, that we hear from LGBTQ youth where there are groups in South County that they meet and they're technically a school club and everything, but they are not in the yearbook because these students are too afraid to have themselves labeled as being part of this club because they're already facing threats, harassment, discrimination from students, from certain teachers as well, that put a lot of stressors on them, and for them to come to this club in the first place is a scary thing. But community is really important. It reduces a big, if students have a supportive community in school, they're much less likely to use substances or attempt suicide, and overall have a higher quality of life. So those are just some of the incidents that we hear of, and there's also things, I'm sure, as it was noted earlier, there's not a lot of young people or teens that we have in this audience, and I'm sure that they're not very aware of these outlets that are available to them to report incidents like this. So, you know, as someone who might be working with them, I want to bring that information to them.
And Danielle, if you could, when they are a victim of any type of incident or crime, how are they reporting those? What are they being taught?
So oftentimes what we hear from youth is sometimes they will go to the school, they will talk with the administration, and that might either go to mediation. We've been hearing, again, it varies on the school with how the school responds to that. I've heard some really positive responses from kids that feel like they're being heard and that there's actions taken against those who are the offending parties. But oftentimes it's kind of just talked about casually as like, oh yeah, this happened today, so-and-so called me this slur. And they kind of just take it in stride because they view it as some of like the cost to them of being out in schools, which is terrible and something that they shouldn't have to fear when they're in school most of their days.
Thank you. Tammy, do you mind sharing your community interactions?
Yeah, absolutely. So we are, the Contemporary Theater Company is located right on Main Street, and I think we see our place as a community hub, and we take that really seriously. And particularly we have a lot of interactions with folks in the high school, particularly South Kingstown High School, and so amongst the folks that work at the theater a lot are a lot of LGBTQ youth, a lot of trans youth, and so we take our responsibility when working with marginalized groups really seriously, and so we want to make sure that our space is safe for folks, is inclusive for folks, and we take our place as sort of an artistic hub of the community and a community gathering spot as a place where dialogue can happen, because when we talk about how to prevent things from happening. I mean, none of us obviously has the answer in terms of how to prevent hate crimes. I mean, those are extreme incidences. But if we can create community spaces where people feel safe and where people feel like they're interacting with people that might be different from them, but everybody can coexist and everybody can acknowledge each other's existence and most importantly acknowledge each other's humanity, then we're taking steps toward creating a community without hate.
Thank you very much. Chief Corrigan, you talk about Narragansett. I know Narragansett has a big kind of vacation community, and you have all the
Correct.
URI students, etc. So
It's
what do you
pretty
see?
transient population, I would say. So I did a search of the past 21 years. That's how long we've had our present record management system. And we've had 5 incidents of bias. 2003, which was anti-Catholic, graffiti, no charges were brought, we didn't locate the people. We had 2 in 2008. One was anti-lesbian, which was graffiti and larceny, and also an anti-Jewish graffiti case. 2020, we had an incident that was anti-black where we made an arrest for disorderly conduct. We charged the hate crime enhancement. We lost that during the sentencing hearing. And the reason is that the way the law is written, the law specifically mentions misdemeanors and felonies, and disorderly conduct was a petty misdemeanor, so it just didn't fit the crafting of the statute. But we did get a conviction on the disorderly conduct. And then in 2022, we had an incident, it was enough disorderly conduct where there was anti-Jewish bias, but knowing that it was disorderly conduct, we couldn't use the hate crime enhancer, so no charges were brought, and that's a totality of it. We haven't had any other kinds of incidents, fortunately, but we do have a program in place with the department to be prepared for it. We've trained 100% of our police department on hate crimes. All our departments have civil rights liaison that are assigned to the Rhode Island Attorney General's office. So if an incident comes up where you have that underlying crime, say you have like a vandalism and there's some kind of indicators that there might be bias involved in the situation, the person that you have for your police department, from mine, it's our prosecution lieutenant. He's going to reach out to the Attorney General's office and then they're going to conduct an investigation, make a determination of whether or not they're going to do that sentence enhancer and try and get that done, if we can, before the initial charges are brought in court or at the latest, the first pretrial conference.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that information about the statewide training with the police departments and the Attorney General's office. Do you see any barriers in Narragansett that would either restrict a person or cause a person not to want to file a complaint with the department?
I don't believe so.
How can they?
No, I'll put a shout out to Dr. Cummings with the school department. He does a fantastic job with the counselors that he has on working for the schools. We have 2 school resource officers presently for 3 schools. We're going to be adding a 3rd. So a lot of attention played to this. We have an excellent prevention community that we work with. Some of those people are here tonight. So there's a lot of outreach going on in our community. So I feel like that people would feel comfortable. If you go to our website, if someone was to experience some kind of bias incident, they can report it right there. We have a link that goes to the Commission on Bias and Prejudice that operates out of Providence, as well as a link for civil rights violations. So we do a lot for outreach through our social media as well.
Thank you. Tammy, you got a question? Answer?
Yeah, I was just going to say that I think that it's really great that we're making it a lot easier to report these types of incidents, and having workshops like this where we can all recognize these incidents probably makes it more likely that somebody is going to report it, or somebody being told an incident happened to them. Now we can go to that person and say, well, that might have been a hate crime, you should report that, because I might not have even known before. But I do think there is sometimes a resistance to getting involved with law enforcement at the base level. And I don't think that's anybody up here specific fault, but I think that's probably one of the biggest barriers, is that sometimes you just don't want law enforcement. You don't want to interact with law enforcement because you're worried that you might have a negative experience. And that's, based on a lot of different things, a lot of complicated cultural factors, but I just wanted to mention that that's a potential complicating factor.
So, working with Chief Moynihan and Chief Corrigan in the past, and Captain St. Ange, I know in the last 10 years the police departments have done so much more as far as community outreach. But how can we as communities reach out to the students that are in the schools and work with the police departments. I know, South Kingstown's doing some great work, as are the other departments, but I'm a resident here, and I see the interactions between police officers, youth, and what more can we do, or what can your company do to encourage that?
Yeah, I think you're right. I think we probably can play a role. I think myself, I'm hesitant to get law enforcement involved. Sometimes we may have an incident at the theater, which is not a hate incident, but it's, an incident with someone that may have a mental illness, or an incident with me that, I'm there with myself, and I don't want to call law enforcement and be harassed as to why I'm where I am when I run the theater. And so I think that over time, I think having more interactions with police that aren't just related to crime, that aren't just related to enforcement of issues, that aren't just related to negative instances, probably could go, a little bit of a way, so that every interaction you have with a police officer isn't just I'm getting pulled over, or I'm targeted, or this is going to be a negative experience for everyone.
And I think this whole event is about that. It's about building community relationships, and you're also teaching people about the hate crimes, hate incidents. Danielle, what can your groups do to increase the community participation with law enforcement? And even, I applaud, the Unitarian Universalist Church, the Tri-County Community Action Program, Kent County Prevention Coalitions. I see some of the work that's being done in the task force that are being created with youth. I mean, there's a lot of great work being done, but how can we make it even better?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, whether we know it or not, a lot of times our own identities, our own beliefs and biases can sometimes impact our jobs, and that's not necessarily always a bad thing. Of course, it's going to have some influence in how you view the world. And I think for a lot of LGBTQ youth, they hear stories of what has happened, and while those might be isolated incidents, if that's all that they're seeing or hearing, that's what they're going to expect for their interactions. Historically, with the LGBTQ community, the police have not been very friendly, and that I've personally seen a lot of change with my own personal biases here with the police that I've interacted within my profession. And knowing LGBTQ people that are in the workforce and people that want to do, regardless of their own personal biases or beliefs, that they want to help this youth that are struggling or experiencing hate. And so I think one of the advice I always give to adults that are talking with youth is to just listen. We have 2 ears and 1 mouth, and so we should be doing twice the amount of listening as we do talking. And a lot of these youth, along with being teenagers who are going to have a general distrust and be adverse to authority, along with that, they want to be listened to, and they want to feel like their concerns are being addressed before they engage within the debate or the conversation of addressing their issues. So I think there's a lot of potential. I've seen a lot of great work from the police departments that I've worked with, from the departments up here, that have really gone to combat that anti-LGBTQ sentiment that was prevalent many years ago.
And Chief Moynihan, when you look at stigmas, and I know you and I both worked in the narcotics unit for years with the state police, and we look at ex-felons coming out of prison, and we look at different races, religions, being a government employee, all the different stigmas that are out there. What are you and your department doing to reduce stigmas?
So I think, it kind of goes through the same line that is really building relationships, and working with our community. And I think this is a perfect example, this workshop here, of bringing people from the community coming forward. We want to invite people into the police department. We know that some people may be reluctant to come and report crimes. And I think it's important that to really explore different ways. I think in the past it was you call 911 or come into the police department, but there's other ways. That we're becoming innovative and really looking at new approaches, whether it's reporting online or sending emails or going through other community groups and partnerships. And I mean, in South Kingston, that's really what we're trying to do and do better. Is really work with our community and build those relationships up so that people feel comfortable. If they don't necessarily know someone in the police department, they may know someone who already has that relationship. And I applaud you, the U.S. Attorney's Office, putting this workshop together, because we need more panels and more discussions in our communities to bring people out and strengthen the relationships that are there.
Thank you. Captain St. Ange, same question. What's North Kingstown doing, and how can we give a little more love instead of having all the hatred anymore?
For me, it's kind of sad to hear that people don't want to come forward to the police. I understand why. It's very unfortunate, because I believe everyone should feel willing to come see us. We're all just humans. We're all just people. I got a wife, I have children, I have a house, I have a mortgage, and a lot of other bills. It's okay to come talk to us about the problems that you have, and then we can help you through them and decide if there is a law broken or if it meets a hate crime definition. But for North Kingstown, we've become more active with our social media. There was a time when we weren't as good, so we're trying to inform the public about stuff. We're trying to inform people to come in and report stuff to us. You can file complaints online. You can file civilian complaints online against officers, which are always investigated. We've taken more of an approach to go to I don't want to say target, but go towards the younger people. Like, we have officers that go out into some of the neighborhoods and they give them Kool-Aid to kids during the summertime, and being more of just a person to let those children get to know police officers, so we get some of those relationships, so we're just normal people. So that's what we're trying to do, is we're trying to get to the younger people, and everybody for that matter, but the younger people at least trying to be the friend. I was a dare officer for 5th grade, and then I did middle school dare, and I loved it. It was probably the most rewarding part of my job. I enjoyed being with the kids. I enjoyed they're so much fun. And so I think it's a great idea that we're targeting the youth to understand that we're just normal people, and it's okay to talk to us and tell us stuff, and we're going to work with them.
Thank you. Rabbi Adler, I know you've been involved in some of these workshops and forums in the past, and give me some words that you think would help communities to, Brian Pires said, instead of calling this United Against Hate, should be, United Against Love. Tell me some words or thoughts on what you've learned over the past couple of years, a year and a half, attending some of these forums. How can we make it better?
Well, the way I see it is, the life cycle is misinformation, supported by confirmation bias, leading to hatred, leading to violence. So the question we have is, where do we intervene? And I think we need to approach it from two different ways. At the lower level, which is misinformation, we need to educate. We need to do the best job that we can to catch kids at an early age, and maybe their parents, do all kinds of programming to kind of show that some of this hateful thinking is absurd, delusional, irrational, doesn't make any sense. On the other side, and I hate to say this because I'm not militant at all, but when it comes to the hate, I think we need to be stronger. I think maybe our laws need to change a little so that a hate incident is treated as a potential hate event. Because if we take too much time analyzing it, people are going to be dying in this environment. So I think, from my perspective, we need to look at it from two ways. Education at the lower end to combat misinformation, and real stronger laws, stronger action to combat the violence that is a result of hate.
Thank you. So does anybody that is attending would like to ask a question to any of the panel members? And if so, if you'd like to come up, I'll share my mic with you. Captain St. Ange, give me a word that would reduce hate in our communities.
Give me what?
A word, just one word, like compromise or something that you see would be beneficial to the communities.
Collaboration.
Collaboration, thank you.
So I hear from the two younger people. I was a principal of a school, so I was around younger people all of my life, pretty much, that there is a fear of reporting things to the police. And I've been thinking a lot about this lately, and I think about the way schools are run, where you have a faculty that works together, but then you have people that are experts in different areas, and they work together too. You have a theater where you work together to put on a show, but you've got people that have their specialties. You have a hospital, and the hospital is one large group, but you have specialties. And I'm seeing quite a bit now about changing the culture of police departments, of policing. And I've talked to some people about this in the police, where instead of just being the cop that graduates and you hand him a gun or her a gun, we have 2 new women in our police force, which I was happy to see. What you do is you go to the colleges that are educating our police and have these courses, and you set up specialties. So you have the cops that are SWAT teams, and they're geared toward that. The cops that are geared toward domestic violence, social workers, psychologists, the cops that are geared to people with mental illness and going out to deal with that kind of thing. The cops that understand what bullying is like in a school and can go in that school and set up mediation courses so the woman whose son feels pressed upon doesn't have to go to the Attorney General's office. There's a mediation. I used to set up mediations in the school so that you deal with it at that level. If we change the culture of our police departments and got the education systems that are educating our police to look upon this as a new form of policing, especially in Narragansett, North Kingstown, South Kingstown, we're small groups. We could set up model police departments on this. And we could work with our schools, Salve, URI. Look at URI, what they're doing with situations there. We could work together and really set up models. Because you know what? We can't take care of things on a national level. It's too big for us. The terrorist group and all. But we can deal with things at a level here that ripples out. And we can be the examples. And that's all I have to say.
Thank you very much. Captain Moynihan, do you want to just kind of explain some of the things that your department's doing here in South Kingstown? And again, I think one thing we all have to remember when it comes to stigmas, right? Again, it doesn't matter if you're male, female, gender, color of your skin, language you speak, being a police officer. I know, from working with the police departments, state police would have 3,000 applicants. Now I think they're lucky if they get 600. I know talking to a local police chief, 6 people applied for his department. So, again, how do we correct stigmas? And I think each one of us has to be a beacon for our communities and our younger kids. They hear us talking and they, Mom's saying this about this group or Dad's saying this about that group. We're responsible. It's up to us, to create community groups, to spread the word and do the right thing. And, they see our biases. I mean, it's there, and it's so hard to overcome. So, Chief, if you could just kind of explain, and I'm not sure if you already have, but some of the great things you're doing. Yes, go ahead.
As we mentioned, or as was mentioned, the Municipal Training Academy graduated on Friday. We brought in 3 new officers to the police department, and we're continuously looking to recruit new police officers. As Dave has indicated, there's a cultural change that's happened, and before we used to have many applicants that would come out. Now we're really on all the chiefs and all the departments are really proactively looking for good women and men to join our ranks and really to reflect upon the communities that we police, because I think communication is so important, and again, it's back to having forums like this and being out in the community. We do coffee with the cops. We do different events at the schools. I spoke to a woman earlier about coming out and talking about internet safety and prevention and how we can be safe when on the internet. And those are, I think, those are the type of speaking engagements we're interested in. I encourage you that if you think of anything that we could do to be out in the community, to either come and talk to your community groups or neighborhood groups, we're always looking for new opportunities and kind of, talk about what we're doing and really how we're trying to improve the department.
Thank you. Chief Carr, I'm going to put you on the hot seat. We have a question. Do you comment about the repeal of the law and what your thoughts are on it?
I'm sorry, what's
Leopold, the law enforcement officer.
Leopold.
Bill of Rights?
Yes. So, yeah, we've done a lot of work on this. If I could just take one step back, you mentioned about some of the stressors between different groups of people. One group of people that has a lot of misconceptions about it is the police. There's been a lot of work that's been done on this when they've taken polls and they ask people what you think about the police in general, like national police. The favorability levels come down, but when they talk about your local police, it's very high because it's the local police that people are interacting with. So there's a lot of things that get said about the police that they're just not true. I understand the stigmas around there, and people have these perceptions, and the perceptions that we have to deal with, and we do, because we understand that they're out there, but it can also be frustrating from the perspective of the police. I've had people come up to me and scream at me, stop killing my people, and no Narragansett police officer has ever taken a life from any citizen in over 130 years. So sometimes that can be very frustrating when you have that come at you. So I think you're right. You're right that we have more conversations so we can break down those walls on that, because I think there's misconceptions coming, both ways on that. Now, as far as legal board is concerned, that's another thing. There's a lot of myths that revolve around this. There'll be an officer that's in trouble. They'll be charged criminally. They'll go to court, and that also gets acquitted. I've had people come up to me and say, we need to get rid of Leopold because Leopold is responsible for that happening. Leopold doesn't have anything to do with criminal charges. Leopold is all about the administrative charges that the police department brings. And that could be from, anything from just regular discipline to being involved in a much more serious incident. So Leopold is something that's very important because it gives the police officers the protection from abuse from administration, abuse from the political class as well. And it also helps the citizens because it is a framework by which the whole people are also responsible. When the chief understands Leopold and knows how to work it, it's really not an issue. I've been a chief for 7 years. I've never had a problem disciplining my people. I've disciplined one officer over 50 days. Because that's a myth that's out there. You can only give people 2 days suspension. It's not accurate because what you're saying is that over 2 days they have a right to appeal to a legal board. Very often, police officers don't want to do that. They want to have a career. They want to advance. And when the chief comes to them and says, "Listen, you made a mistake. You're going in the wrong direction. I want to save your career. You're going to take this punishment, or I'm going to move for termination." And I've had other officers who don't work for the police department anymore who also didn't go to the legal board. So it's a far more nuance, like Brian Pires mentioned earlier. People want simple cookie-cutter answers on a lot of these issues, but it's very complicated. But we also think that legal board can be better. So as a police chief association, Chief Moynihan and myself are on the executive board. We've been working on this issue for years, and we have a series of recommendations that we've been trying to push through our Congress here in Rhode Island to become law. We want to expand that summary punishment from the 2 days up to 10 to 14 days. We want more latitude to be able to speak about cases, because sometimes what happens is there's an issue with an officer, and because we're going through a hearing, the chief will say, "I can't talk about it, it's going through the legal process." And that vacuum becomes something where people start talking, the rumor mill starts going. So we want more latitude to come forward and be able to tell the public, "Listen, we are taking action on this, and here's the process," and educate them on that. So we think that'll help. And we're also trying to make the panel be something that people will perceive as being fair. I think it's fair now, but the way it works now, the officer who's accused has a pick, the chiefs has a pick, and then there's a neutral that the two sides agree on, or it's picked by the Superior Court judge. We want to set this up so that we're going to have police officers that both the chief and the union has agreed are independent thinking people, and then bring somebody maybe who's involved in the judiciary to kind of run the panel, and then bring two community members in so we can get those eyes from the community involved in the legal panel. And we think that'll bring more transparency and more fairness to the process.
Thank you very much for the thorough answer. Any questions? Yes. I'll come over to you.
Hi, I'm a member of Congregation Beth David, and I want to say that I think this whole workshop has been wonderful. I think it's opened a lot of issues that maybe people haven't thought about before. But if you step back and think about sort of the main theme of what we've talked about, it's a very reactive theme. What do you do after a crime occurs or discrimination occurs? Who do you talk to? Who do you call? And I think that and Rabbi Adler alluded to this, this was very valuable, but maybe the next panel, the next discussion is we aim further upstream and we say, how can we prevent this? I mean, I belong to a synagogue. We now lock our doors. 10 minutes after services are scheduled to begin, we lock our doors. In my entire life, I have never belonged to a synagogue that had to lock their doors. So there's something very poisonous happening. So we need to try to stop the poison. And I don't have an answer. I just throw it out there as maybe this is our next step. And maybe the next panel is a panel with politicians. For example, I know that, well, there were just flyers sent out in Barrington, but I know this also happened in North Kingston because we have some congregants who live in North Kingston, and they were pretty freaked out by this. Never heard anything about what happened. And I understand that there's due process, but it just kind of falls in this hole. And so how do you stop these people? I think that's the real question. I don't have an answer. I just throw the question out. Thank you.
Thank you for that question. I was hoping you were going to give the answer.
Thank you. First of all, just to Chief Corrigan, I'm Craig Swan from St. Peter's. Narragansett Police Department deserves a shout out for all the collaborative work you do, especially with our congregations. You're right, if people had a chance to sit down and talk and work collaboratively, a lot of issues would go away. But one of the things that Rabbi Adler and I work very closely together, and with Liz, the thing that we're talking about is what is the problem with calling something in. And as I said to you earlier, I used to be a children's protection service worker for the state of Connecticut. And even today as a priest, calling in a media report, calling in a referral on that gets my nerves on end just because there's always that fear that you go from 0 to 60, it's you call, and the image is, even though I know this isn't true, the kids get yanked, which isn't true. There's a lot of in between. I think with this situation, we see the same problem. We need to be reporting the small stuff, but we need to know that there is collaborative intervention at that point. Because there's one thing that Rabbi and I discuss all the time, sadly, it feels like we saw these points of problems along the way with every time there's a shooting, but no one could intervene. And so the question becomes, if the community's going to call in the small stuff, we need to know that somewhere within the community, whether it be within our school systems, that there's some sort of collaborative conversation that allows for intervention to, hey, let's check in with Johnny on this, not in a threatening way, but a non-threatening way. Let's check in with so-and-so on what's going on here, and maybe turn it around before it becomes something so large that we've got bodies on the ground. And again, luckily, we live in very peaceful communities. We have small community policing, which allows for relationship. Unfortunately, on the national level, what we see on the news is very, very different. But it just doesn't seem like, as we hear on the national media, there's a sense of that we're having intervention at the low point when people began to see the problem. Thank you.
I'd like to respond to that. Thank you. So I think what I've seen tonight is kind of like two topics that kind of get wrapped together. There's hate crime, and then there's situational awareness, or what sometimes we refer to as see something and say something. We do have programs for that. All three of our departments are accredited. We're all required to have situational assessment response training, where we're taught to look for behaviors, not to target groups of people. But we are definitely taught to look for certain behaviors. We all have the same intelligence policy that is all set up for when people report incidents to us, how we're going to have the intake of that, how we're going to conduct an investigation, how long we're going to hold on to it, how we're going to purge it if it's unfounded. So as we've been talking up here, we've been talking more about the hate crime part of it, which is definitely more responsive because the crimes occurred, and there's a certain process in order for there to be due process for the accused. On the other end of our programs that we have set up, all three of us are in a partnership on crisis intervention, team training. We all do crisis negotiation. We all work with a mental health counselor. We all do various forms of outreach. So, one of the reasons why we've done a lot of great work with the rabbi and the Christian community in Narragansett, because we do have a liaison for the faith community. So it's a large program where I can get into the weeds on a lot and take up the whole night. But we've been kind of focusing our answers on just the hate crime part of it, but it's far more expansive. And we talk about it all the time. We're always sharing ideas and working with our partners. Brian Pires being one of the big ones, as well as you, Dave.
Thank you. I know the departments are doing a lot of great work. If I can just share with people, we have the Tri-County Community Action Program. I think one of the problems is, we have our youth in schools that have a lot of trouble right now, a lot of different issues that they're dealing with. And, as soon as we target one group and some other group may get targeted, that's unfair. But I want you to really know, Heidi Driscoll from the South County Prevention Coalition, their group and other groups are doing so much mental health work in the schools. Our office, we do an opioid presentation, high schools and colleges. And I'm just amazed to hear the stories from some of these families and kids in the schools. And back to the Tri-County Community Action Program. They offer resources. If you reach out to them, they will come and do an assessment. You have to have a student or a person in your home under the age of 18. They will come, they will do an assessment for you. They will put you in touch, your family's in touch with the resources that they need. I think there's so many great resources out there. There's so much great work that the police departments are doing. The theater company, Danielle's group. But unfortunately, it's not all cohesive. So I don't know how we make it all cohesive. You heard Chief Corrigan talk about many of the police departments now have a mental health specialist, certified person, riding with them. Because we all see the different, problems and issues that police officers face. You look at the George Floyd issue. As a police officer, that was horrendous watching that. And unfortunately, it's made the stigma of me being a retired police officer being worse. I walk across Kennedy Plaza, across diverse groups, and I'm called different names and different things. And I see the way people look at me. So it's the stigmas. But please know there's so many resources out there that, we need to take advantage of, whether it's in North Kingstown, South Kingstown, Providence, etc. Anybody want to add to that, Danielle?
I just wanted to address the last two speakers' points too. As I work in prevention, and it's more so substance use prevention, we hear a lot of the similar things of, there's people that get into the substance use field and they want to be in intervention or they want to be in the rehab, and there's not always people that are, applying for prevention work, because it's might not be as exciting or reactionary as some of the other work that people do, but all have an equal part, and we don't always see sometimes the results of people not doing things. We have that issue sometimes with substance use prevention, and why we rely a lot on statistics and surveys, so we can see the actual changes comparatively. For example, cigarette use in the 80s comparatively to now. While we might see some environmental impact, we see more so in the statistics that kids are not using cigarettes like they were decades ago. And with that, when we're thinking about what we can do right now for prevention, and how we talked about how dialogue like this is really needed, I think a big problem that exists is that a lot of these dialogue, these positions don't exist. And when I got out of college, and I got out of college 5 years ago now, I don't know, that there's not positions. I had done hundreds of facilitation on multiple different issues with identity, with bystander intervention, many different types of things. And there's not jobs that are out there where people can do this necessarily professionally. And that's not on necessarily any type of industry to have that position in there, but I think we are seeing, and that the general consensus, at least in this room, is that we need more of these spaces. And one thing that we can do until there are more changes where these positions can be available is have the informal conversations, or look at online resources. The University of Michigan Intergroup Relations Education has a lot of facilitation guidance and resources for people to start the conversations, because that's where the actual change can happen, at your dinner table, at talking to people after this event, bringing things up like that, where we have a lot more common ground and we can combat some of those stigmas before they actually come to fruition.
Thank you. Tammy, would you like to share your final thoughts?
Sorry, to cough stuff in my mouth. No, I think the dialogue and keeping the lines of communication open is huge, and listening to what people are saying is their reality, and then acting on that. We at the theater try to make sure that if people are telling us that they don't feel safe in a space, or that somebody has done something that caused them to feel unsafe, that we are taking action on that as quickly as we can. And I think that everybody has that sort of agency. Just like you were saying, everybody has agency over their own little individual space. And the safer we can make those spaces, I think, for people to feel like they can be their self, I think you can make steps toward creating communities that are more inclusive and are less accepting of these types of hate crimes and things.
So I will offer to this group, this just won't end tonight. If anybody wants to be part of a group where we meet quarterly, myself and Brian Pires in our office, we're involved in Project Safe Neighborhoods. It's similar to what we're doing here. We address issues, we talk about how we can make things better. If anybody wants to continue with something like that, you have my email addresses. Let's continue to meet, let's continue to talk, and spread the love. Yes.
Hi, everybody. Thank you for coming. My dad was a retired lieutenant in the state police, and I have tremendous respect for law enforcement. So my credo is not defund the police, it's defend the police. My question to you is that I am a white, Catholic, pro-life, patriotic American, and I don't see me represented really up there today. So I'm wondering, are you ever going to have, say, the pro-life groups up there that are being attacked because of the Roe v. Wade decision? Those places are being attacked now. And I just wonder also, and this is not for you because this is a federal issue more, but we see our FBI chief that was just held in contempt of Congress today. We had a former DOJ that was held in contempt of Congress, and nothing was done. Nothing. But yet, we did have a gentleman who was conservative, and he was arrested for being in contempt of Congress. So, for me, the question is really, I'm feeling a little bit like there's a little bit of a two-tier justice system, in a way. So I'm hoping that, with this dialogue, I'm just hoping that we can, I don't know how someone like me, is going to be comfortable doing this, reporting, because we feel like we are now the ones that are, being marginalized. So, anyway, thank you.
Yeah, I can just speak on a little bit of that where, I know that, at least for myself, I'm speaking as from my position as a professional in this field, as all of us are, and we might have identities that have the same religion and the same racial identity, but we're talking about the certain issues that we were brought to talk about here today. And when we're talking about panels like these, oftentimes a lot of the voices that we might have up here, for example, LGBTQ, have not traditionally been welcome in these spaces and have not been invited into the conversation. And when we talk about political views, obviously there's a lot of, there's some conflict, right? There's a lot of people that are going to disagree on things. But when we're talking about hate crimes, political ideology is not a protected class. And while we have different opinions in that we're going to share that, when we're talking about hate crimes in that regard, a pro-life person being up here would not fall under what we're talking about. What I just explained, that it's not a hate crime. It's not a protected class, political ideology.
Well, the thing is, it's protecting our religion and protecting our life. I mean, and yet these places are being attacked. So, and not really too much is being done about it.
So I don't want to necessarily interrupt too much, but I don't think that these things have to be either or. This is not an us against them. This is looking in our communities and seeing what crimes are occurring and what crimes are being driven by hatred and stopping that. And I think we can really all agree that that's important to do. And if anybody here, I think what we've learned today is that if anybody here feels like they have been the target of a crime based on their identity, then we should go report that and then let the law take its course. But I don't think we have to position ourselves as one being more marginalized than another, or one being up here and one being not. And it's just about creating a space where we all feel safe and free to be a part of this community.
So, sir, I'm going to end with you. I'm
sorry?
I'm going to end the night with you. Could you just share your thoughts and insight? You look like you're in deep thought. We haven't heard from you in a while. And I will say, based on your question, I think anytime we're trying to correct a problem, sometimes we pick another race or religion or something else that gets shoved aside or maybe picked upon. It's just so important that we're all one, right? We all want to accept one another. We need compromise. We need respect. And I think that's not happening in our world today. So, Rabbi Evan?
I think we have to learn how to disagree without being disagreeable. I think that as much as hate can be learned, it can be unlearned. And I think as a society, if we're going to survive, we need to adopt a zero-tolerance policy. We really, really do. We need to get to the point where we say we're mad as you know what, and we're not going to take it anymore. And that'll protect us and also send a message to the haters and those who want to exact violence against us. And ultimately, I think what we're all looking for is very ancient Hebrew word, shalom, which is peace, contentment, and blessing.